What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I want to put out my SHTF forecast for 2023. So, we have a lot of stuff going on around the world, and 2022 has been absolutely crazy. And I think 2023 is going to be even worse. So, we had Russia invade Ukraine in 2022 and nobody expected that to happen. Even myself, I didn't even think that Russia would do that. But, major lesson from 2022 is to expect the unexpected and to prepare for the worst because it seems like the worst case scenarios have been materializing. So, just make sure you're prepared for the worst case scenarios in 2023. Okay. Think about nuclear war survival. Check out my nuclear war survival videos. Check out my How to Survive Nuclear War series. Check out my Dark Winter fictional nuclear war survival series. So, what are some of the things that I'm concerned about in 2023? Well, obviously, Ukraine is the first one that's on my mind, and that's the one that really concerns me the most, just because of the superpowers involved in this war. We have Russia and the United States, which are the two largest nuclear powers in the world. Okay. So that's why I cover Ukraine so much, because Ukraine right now is the flashpoint that could lead to nuclear war. Okay. China invading Taiwan is not going to lead to nuclear war. North Korea invading South Korea is not going to lead to nuclear war. Israel attacking Iran, probably not going to lead to nuclear war. Okay. So that's why my eyes are focused on Ukraine so much. All right. Because there's no other flashpoint around the world that has the potential at this moment to flare up into a nuclear war or World War III. So every prepper should be focusing on Ukraine the most right now of any overseas situations going on. Ukraine should be number one in terms of your energy and your focus. So I think in Ukraine, what we're going to see is a second massive ground attack by Russia, and they're going to try to go for the capital, Kyiv. And I think they're also going to try to go for Western Ukraine to try to cut off the flow of weapons into Ukraine from Poland. And we've been seeing Belarus massing their forces in southern Belarus, Russia also massing their forces, 80 to 100,000 Russian and Belarusian troops stationed just 20 kilometers from the Polish and Ukrainian border, okay, in southwestern Belarus right now. And Belarus has received the Kinzhal hypersonic weapons that can have a nuclear warhead attached to it. And Putin said that he would train Belarusian fighter pilots to launch those Kinzhal hypersonic missiles with the nuclear warheads attached. He specifically mentioned that Russia was going to train Belarusian fighter pilots and Air Force pilots to launch nuclear weapons. Okay, so that's very concerning. Another massive ground attack on Ukraine, going for the capital and trying to seal off the western border of Ukraine from weapons coming in, will pose a big problem. A lot of people are going to panic. If that happens, you're going to see the stock market collapsing. Okay, in the Western world, you're going to see people pulling out of the stock market. We could see oil prices go up again as a result of another massive ground attack. And if that ground attack fails, okay, If Putin fails to accomplish his objective on the ground with ground forces, that's when I think he's going to reach for the nukes. And that's something that I'm really concerned about in 2023, is not just a massive ground attack on the capital of Ukraine and Western Ukraine, but also Putin using nuclear weapons. I think there's a very high chance of that happening. Okay, so we need to be prepared for that. If you're watching this from Ukraine, you need to really make sure you have your nuclear war survival plan in order. Okay, and if you're watching this from anywhere else, you still need to have a nuclear war survival plan. And it's more than just buying a gas mask and potassium iodide. All right, you need to have a suitable fallout shelter. You need to find an underground structure that will protect you from gamma radiation and neutron radiation, mostly gamma radiation, though. And that's going to be the biggest threat after a nuclear war or nuclear attack. The fallout is going to be the biggest killer, more so than the blast and the thermal radiation. Okay, so you need to have a shelter. A fallout shelter is absolutely critical. All right, even if you live in the most rural, isolated location in North America, in northern Canada, or somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, far away from any nuclear war targets, doesn't matter. Okay, the fallout is going to spread because of the wind. So you need to have an underground structure that's dense enough to protect you from gamma radiation. And I talk about how to find a suitable fallout shelter and all kinds of stuff in my How to Survive Nuclear War series. And I'll attach a link to that series in the top right corner of this video. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's very detailed. I talk about radiation protection, dosimeters, radiation doses. I talk about protection factors, all kinds of things. I can't talk about that in this video because it would take forever. That's why I dedicated a whole series to it. It's just hours and hours and hours of information you need to go and watch. So Ukraine is the number one thing that I'm watching right now. I'm concerned about a massive ground attack on the capital and an attack on Western Ukraine along the Polish border to try to cut off the flow of NATO weapons going into Ukraine, and a possible nuclear escalation if that ground attack fails, which I do believe it will fail. I don't think that Russia is going to be able to seize the capital. I think they may make some limited gains in Western Ukraine, possibly, or near the capital, but I don't think they're going to be able to surround the capital and take it because, number one, they have a lot of Western equipment now. They have a lot of troops, but also because the West simply will not allow it. Okay, the West, NATO is simply not going to allow Russia to take over all of Ukraine. It's not going to happen. Okay, because that would be a strategic disaster for NATO to have Russia right on NATO's doorstep in Poland. That would be a strategic disaster. So NATO is going to do everything they can to prevent that from happening. And they have a lot of tricks up their sleeve. We haven't even seen much of what NATO is capable of on a covert level. I'm not even talking about overt. I'm talking about covert actions. We've only scratched the surface or seen the tip of the iceberg of what NATO is capable of. And if it's looking like Russia's going to take the capital, NATO has a lot of different tricks up their sleeve. Okay. So just be prepared for the situation in Ukraine to escalate. And if there is another massive ground attack on the capital and a push into Western Ukraine, you're going to see a lot of panic, not just in the stock market, but people are going to panic. They're going to try to buy all kinds of preparedness items. Just a few months ago, during the height of the war in Ukraine, when there was a lot of nuclear scares and people were afraid of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant melting down, there was a shortage of potassium iodide and dosimeters. Okay, So make sure you get yourself a dosimeter, not a Geiger counter. You want a dosimeter so you can measure your radiation dose. Okay, that's the most important thing. And potassium iodide was also running out. So go ahead and get yourself potassium iodide and a dosimeter, um, because I guarantee you, if there's another massive ground attack on Ukraine, people are going to buy that up. Okay. Same thing with ammo, same thing with preparedness food, freeze dried food, canned food. Any preparedness items are going to dry up. So, get what you need now. All right. Because there's all indications pointing to another massive ground attack on Ukraine from Russia. And if that fails, that's when Putin is going to use the nukes. I hope he doesn't, but that's when we have to be concerned that Putin could use the nukes if he fails another massive ground attack. And, then we could also talk about the possibility of an uprising in Russia, possibly an overthrow of Putin if there's another massive mobilization and a failed ground attack. Then we have to be worried about possibly an uprising in Russia. Okay, so Ukraine is really important. We have to keep an eye on it. We also have Taiwan and China. We've had all kinds of provocations this year in the Taiwan Strait. And just a few days ago, China sent the most amount of fighter jets and aircraft across the Taiwan Strait ever. They sent 71 airplanes, and out of those 71 airplanes, 47 of them crossed into Taiwan's protected airspace. Okay, 47 planes flying into Taiwan's protected airspace. All right, and 71 planes total going into the Taiwan Strait. And that's the most ever by China. Okay, so the situation in Taiwan is escalating, and I'm really concerned that we could possibly see some kind of physical provocations by China next year, not just planes crossing into Taiwan's airspace, but possibly some blockades, and maybe China is going to sink some merchant ships or commercial ships, Taiwanese commercial ships. Okay, they could sink them. They could blockade their routes, something like that. Obviously, a full-scale invasion is very possible, so I'm concerned about that. And of course, if China invades Taiwan, the U.S. is going to have to help Taiwan. So, that would be another flashpoint that we have to keep an eye on is Taiwan. Okay. And we could see some actual physical provocations next year. Like I said, possibly some blockading or sinking of commercial ships, more planes flying into Taiwan's airspace. And here we have a picture of North Korea's missiles. And North Korea tested a few more missiles this year, and their long range missile capability is basically, they're ready to strike America. They have what they need to strike America. The only thing they don't have are functioning nuclear warheads. Okay. And so we could see North Korea test some kind of nuclear warhead maybe next year. But really, I'm more concerned about North Korea attacking South Korea rather than North Korea attacking the US. Because if they were to attack the US, we would instantly obliterate them. They would have no chance against us. Okay, so I'm more concerned about North Korea attacking South Korea. And just in the last few weeks and months, we've seen tensions escalating on the Korean Peninsula. Just a few days ago, North Korea sent some drones into South Korea's airspace, and South Korea shot one of those drones down. And then South Korea retaliated by sending their own drones into North Korean airspace. And then just a few months ago, we had a situation where North Korea fired artillery into South Korea's protected waters. and then South Korea retaliated by firing artillery back. So the situation is slowly escalating, and in 2023, I think we could see more of that, and we could possibly see North Korea attack South Korea even, okay, simultaneously, while Russia does another big ground attack on Ukraine. We could see that happen, and then simultaneously, China would attack Taiwan. That's basically the worst case scenario. And then we have the Middle East. We have Benjamin Netanyahu back in power. He's the prime minister of Israel, and he's a very strong leader, and he despises Iran. And he's talked about how he would strike Iranian nuclear facilities, okay? And, he's openly talked about it. So if Israel conducts a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, obviously, things would really escalate in this world, not just in Iran, but he would also strike Syria and different types of targets in Syria. And we know Syria is protected by Russia. So that could be the hook that brings Russia down into the Middle East, just like the Bible says in Ezekiel 38 and 39. The Bible says that God would put hooks in the jaws of Magog, which is Russia, and bring Russia into the Middle East. And this could possibly be that situation because Iran and Syria are really good allies of Russia. Okay. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, in my opinion, I would say it's a 90% chance that he's going to strike Iranian nuclear facilities and various targets in Syria and Iran in 2023. I think there's a very high chance of that happening. He's getting older, guys. I think he's over 70. He's getting older, so it's basically now or never. And I'm sure he's not totally sure whether or not he's going to be able to get reelected again next time around. So he wants to use his time in office to do whatever he can to stop Iran because it's not a guarantee if he's going to get reelected or not. Okay, so we have to be on high alert and pay attention to the situation in Israel and Iran and the Middle East. So, moving on from the Middle East, we have political turmoil here in the United States. We just had midterm elections, and the Democrats picked up a lot of seats. A lot of red and purple states flipped to blue, and there's just a massive amount of division in this country between Democrats and Republicans. The red states are getting redder, and the blue states are getting bluer. And really, the amount of purple states is shrinking. It's almost like you're either a red state or you're a blue state. And this past election was really a disaster for the Republicans and for Donald Trump. So we could possibly see the end of Trumpism in the Republican Party, and we could see someone like Ron DeSantis step up and possibly become the next president. But the amount of division in this country is just absolutely insane. And there's just a lot of mistrust in the electoral system. A lot of people don't trust our elections. A lot of people don't trust the process, whether it's fair, and whether there's any kind of fraud. There's a lot of people who just don't think that these elections are being done the right way. And, a lot of people think there's fraud. So, we have a lot of swing states and red states that have gone blue in this last election. And whether that was legitimate or illegitimate doesn't matter. What's going to happen is you're going to have states that have a lot of conservatives in them that have turned blue. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of division in those types of states. Okay. States that were red or swing for a long time and then they go blue, there's going to be a lot of division and animosity in those states. Okay. So this is something that's on my radar. And we also have our critical infrastructure and power grid that's been under attack the last few months. We had that substation attack in Moore County, North Carolina, where over 100,000 people lost power for up to a week. Okay. So that is just crazy. And most recently, we had a situation in the state of Washington where there were 4 substations that were attacked. And regardless of who is doing it, whether it's Russia or the New World Order or China, whatever, doesn't matter. What matters is that it's happening and it's going to continue to happen. And next year, I believe we're going to see more of these substation attacks. Now, in my opinion, I think these are Russian agents and they're going after our power grid because we're basically at war with Russia right now. Okay, we are in a kind of a hybrid war against Russia. Okay, we're in a proxy war. We're supporting Ukraine and we're trying to strategically defeat Russia through Ukraine. Okay, and Russia knows that. They're not stupid and they're going to try to do whatever they can to weaken us. And whether that means, opening up new fronts around the world by telling North Korea to invade South Korea or China to invade Taiwan, they're going to do it. They're going to try to open up new fronts around the world for us to deal with. And then they're going to try to attack us at home. Okay, if you don't believe that Russia has saboteurs and spies in this country, then you're really not that bright, okay? Because Russia is probably one of the few countries that has such a well developed spy and sabotage program, okay? Remember, the KGB, the notorious KGB, originated in Russia, okay? And if you think the KGB doesn't exist anymore, then you're really out of touch. The KGB is still around and they're still doing all kinds of stuff, and they probably have thousands if not millions of spies and saboteurs in our country, and they're ready to act and strike targets when they're told to do so. Okay, so I personally believe these attacks are Russian saboteurs and Russian spies that are being ordered by the Kremlin to carry out these attacks. So I think we're going to see more of them. So you need to be prepared for the possibility of power failures in your area. Okay. And we also have natural disasters to worry about. In 2022, we had a lot of natural disasters. We had all kinds of stuff happening in 2022. And I think 2023, we're also going to have a lot of natural disasters. We had this crazy Arctic front move through the country over Christmas, and there was a state of emergency in Buffalo where there was like 4 to 6 feet of snow, and at least 30 people died in this storm. Absolutely insane. People just buried in their cars and stranded on roads. You have to have a winter survival kit in your car if you're going to be traveling anywhere in the winter. Okay. I don't care if it's sunny. I don't care if there's a blizzard forecasted. That winter survival kit should be in your car at all times. You should have warm clothing. Okay. Warm boots, hat, gloves. You should have a wool blanket. Okay. Fire starter, sleeping bag, bug out bag. All these things you should bring with you in your vehicle. You should leave at least warm clothes, boots, and a wool blanket in your car at all times. And if you're going further, you can bring your bug out bag with you in your vehicle. Now, you don't want to leave your bug out bag in your vehicle in the winter time because the items in your bug out bag could freeze. Okay. But I think we're going to see more natural disasters. We're in a triple La Nina right now. We're heading into possibly a grand solar minimum, which could cause global cooling. So we need to be prepared for global cooling. Okay. The global warming is over. Okay. We're entering now a global cooling period over the next 50 years. And it's happened before. There was something called the Little Ice Age between 1400 and 1700. There was something called the Little Ice Age where global temperatures were much below average, and it was so cold that the Thames River in London would freeze solid every winter, and they would have frost fairs on the ice of the river. Okay, more volcanic activity next year. Okay, more earthquakes. All right, volcanic activity has been at an all-time high the last year or so. All right, we've seen all kinds of volcanic activity around the world. All right, a lot of earthquakes. So we need to be prepared for that. If there's a massive volcanic explosion, even if it happens on the other side of the world, it doesn't matter. It can affect us here in the United States. Okay, the last time we had a massive volcanic eruption was Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, which caused global cooling, and that was in 1994. Okay, the eruption of Mount Pinatubo caused temporary global cooling for the 6 months after the eruption because of the column of ash that went into the atmosphere and blocked out some of the sun. Okay, so we need to be prepared for that. Also, solar flares. We had a few solar flares this year, and solar flares can wreak havoc on our power grid. They could have the same effect as an EMP, a high altitude nuclear detonation. Okay, they could take out our power grid. And not only can they take out our power grid, but they can do massive damage to radio communications. All kinds of communications devices can be damaged from a strong solar flare. And we're approaching solar maximum sometime in 2024 to 2025. So solar flares are going to ramp up. Solar activity is going to start ramping up. We reached the solar minimum in 2019, and we're going to reach the next solar maximum 2024, 2025-ish. And most solar cycles are around 11 years in length. Okay, so the chances of solar flares are going to be greater next year than they were this year because we're ramping up towards that solar maximum. Okay, and as we reach solar maximum, there's more and more flares and coronal mass ejections, CMEs. Okay, so we have to be prepared for that. Now, we are in possibly a grand solar minimum right now. Okay, so solar cycle 24, the last solar cycle, which ended in 2019, was greatly reduced compared to solar cycle 23. And the last time we had weak solar cycles, it caused a mini ice age between 1400 and 1700. Okay, so here we have this graph showing the sunspot count for solar cycle 24 and solar cycle 25. And you can see solar cycle 24 peaked around 2014, and it maxed out at around 150 sunspots, which is really low. And we haven't seen that low of a sunspot count on a solar cycle since the Dalton minimum. Okay, the Dalton minimum was the early 1800s. And during that time period, we had reduced solar activity. And interestingly, during the Dalton minimum, we had the year without a summer, which was 1816. All right, it was so cold one summer in 1816 that there was snow in June in upstate New York, and many streams and rivers were frozen over even all the way through July in New England. Okay. All right. That was the summer of 1816. Okay. And you can see here that NASA is forecasting solar cycle 25 to be basically just as strong as solar cycle 24. And right now we're up to around 88 sunspots. So solar cycle 25 is going to be weak, okay? And it could have an effect on our climate and cause global cooling, all right? And you can see they're forecasting it to peak around July 2025, all right? So we're ramping up right now. You see where we are right here, 2022, and we're going to ramp up to the peak around 2025. And this is when we could see X-class flares happening, really strong solar flares that could take down our power grid. So please make sure you're prepared. Make sure you have everything you need to generate your own electricity. And here we have the last 400 years of sunspots. And you can see here between 1600 and 1750, there was something known as the Maunder minimum. This was the last grand solar minimum, and it lasted at least 50 years. And you could see that there were very little sunspots counted, especially between 1650 and 1700, almost no sunspots at all over 50 years. And consequently, during this time period, we had global cooling. We had the little ice age. Okay. That's when in England they had the frost fairs on the Thames River. Okay. So we could be seeing that happening again in the next 10, 20, 30 years. All right. And, our society right now is not prepared for a Maunder minimum or little ice age type event. Okay. People today don't have wood stoves or coal stoves in their house. Most people are reliant on electricity or natural gas or oil or propane deliveries. They don't have any kind of self sustaining way of heating their homes, okay, and cooking. Back in the 1600s, that's the only way people heated their homes and cooked is with coal stoves and wood stoves, okay? But nowadays, everybody either has electric or natural gas. And if there's a little ice age, I can guarantee you that there's going to be a tremendous strain on heating fuels, oil, propane, and we could see interruptions in the power grid and delivery of natural gas because it's so cold. That cold weather just puts a strain on the power grid and on our infrastructure and our capability to heat ourselves, especially as the world transitions into carbon neutral status where more and more countries are banning gasoline and fossil fuels, and they're trying to transition only into battery powered things and electric heating and things like that. And even some states are banning wood stoves and coal stoves. And New York tried to ban wood stoves. I'm not sure what the situation is in Canada, but I know in Canada they wanted to ban stoves also. Okay, so as we transition more into this carbon neutral crap, people are going to lose the capability of self sufficiency. Okay, they're not going to be able to have wood stoves and coal stoves because they're going to either be illegal or the local building codes are going to make it so hard to have one that people are just not even going to bother. So we need to think about this, guys. Okay, we need to prepare for a global cooling period. But here we have the Dalton minimum. You can see in the early 1800s, we had these two solar cycles here that were greatly reduced. And then we had the modern maximum where we had like 300 plus sunspots in the 1950s and all the way up into the early 2000s. Okay, solar cycle 23. Okay, we had a maximum sunspot number of 250, and the early 2000s and the 90s, all these solar cycles were really active. Okay, and that's consequently the same time when the whole global warming scam originated by Al Gore, and they were pushing global warming on us, telling us that the ice caps were going to melt by 2010 or something like that. Well, it's 2022 and the ice caps are still there. So as you can see from this modern maximum, we've really stepped down. You can see solar cycle 24 is basically almost as strong as these solar cycles here during the Dalton minimum. Okay, and here you can see the last four solar cycles since 1980 have been getting weaker and weaker. So solar cycle 21, and then solar cycle 22, 23, 24 just progressively getting weaker. Okay, and heading towards that solar minimum, okay, grand solar minimum. And here's a picture of one of those frost fairs on the River Thames in London. You can see all these huts here, all these tents where merchants would come to sell different goods on the frozen river in London. I mean, just think about that, guys. The river in London never freezes. So it has happened before and it can happen again. And even going back into the medieval times, we had something known as the medieval warm period, which lasted from about 1000 to 1400 AD, and global temperatures were really warm around 1200, 13th century. And then just right after that, we plunged into the Little Ice Age. Okay, so just because things are warm doesn't mean it's going to be warm forever. Okay, as you can see here, we went from the medieval warm period way above average to Little Ice Age way below average. Okay, and then finally, I think we're going to see an increase in the amount of UFO sightings being reported. The US government had officially um, put out that UAP report last year in 2021. And since they put out that report, they have set up a special office to record all of the UFO sightings and keep track of them, either by members of the public or by members of the armed forces, people in the Air Force, the Navy, the Army that have been seeing these UFOs, UAPs. So the government now has an office to keep track of all these sightings, okay, by members of the public and members of the armed forces. And I think in 2023, we're going to see some interesting revelations about UAPs, okay? And just in the last few months, there's been a massive amount of sightings reported to this government office. But I mean, just think about it, guys. I mean, we're living in a time where our government has literally set up an office to keep track of UFO sightings, okay? I mean, when I was a kid, I would have never imagined that that would ever happen, okay? UFOs were always denied. You know, the government always tried to deny any existence of UFOs and UAPs, and now they've flipped completely opposite, and now they're basically open about it and saying that, yeah, there are UFOs. We don't know what they are, but they exist, okay? American fighter pilots are seeing these weird objects flying in the sky, and they're defying the laws of physics. Okay, they're able to hover in place without any discernible means of propulsion. They're able to cover vast distances in a matter of seconds. Okay, traveling 100 miles in a matter of a second. All of these types of situations have been reported by American fighter pilots. Okay, and if you don't believe me, you can just watch the Joe Rogan show. All right, he had Commander David Fravor on his show, and he also had Ryan Daves. Both of these guys are decorated Air Force fighter pilots, and both of them had UFO encounters. Okay, and both of them basically saw the same thing. They saw a spherical object that covered vast distances in short amounts of time and was able to hover in place without any means of propulsion, and basically was able to stay still in the middle of the air, without even moving a little bit, even swaying with the wind. Okay, Ryan Daves said that he saw a sphere in the sky that wasn't even moving with the wind. It was perfectly stationary in the sky, and it wasn't even, rocking back and forth or up and down. It was just perfectly stationary. So I think our government knows a lot more than what they're telling us, okay? And now they're slowly starting to reveal information about these UFOs because they want us to kind of get comfortable with the idea that UFOs exist. And, who knows, they might even declare next year that UFOs are real and that they have all kinds of information about UFOs, that all these years UFOs existed and they were keeping it secret from us. Maybe next year is the year that they, make that big announcement. So I'm going to keep you guys updated on all of these things, all of these events around the world. I'm going to keep you updated. So stay tuned to the NYPrepper channel for the latest information on Ukraine, Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula, UFOs, natural disasters, critical infrastructure attacks, political turmoil, and then also obviously it's a prepping channel, so I have all kinds of prepping information on my channel, prepping videos, firearms videos. I have a lot of things planned for my channel in 2023, including winter survival videos, more firearms videos, and then I'm going to continue with my dark winter fictional nuclear war survival series. So stay tuned to my channel, guys. But that's all I got for now. Happy New Year. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the three P's: prepare, practice, and persevere.